First and foremost, be honest. You want people to think of the brand as fair and honest. If you're going to do business with something, you want to make sure that you feel good about that brand, right?
Hi, this is Sue Kirshner with Brand Strong Marketing, and I have a wonderful guest today on Turbo Branding. And as always, we're going to talk about how to ignite your growth by leveraging the brand to grow faster, easier, and more successfully. But first, I want to introduce you to Terry Rich, our guest today. I'm going to be sharing a few sentences about his impressive background, but then I think you're going to learn a lot more about him as he shares his stories today. So let me start with Terry Rich is a global keynote speaker and an author. He's known as a disruptive innovator and entrepreneur with a drive for integrity and honesty. He's worked in the trenches, survived new business trends, and has had success with generational changes. He's authored 2 books, The $80 Billion Gamble and Dare to Dream, Dare to Act. But why I'm thrilled to talk about him today is that he's started 4 successful entrepreneurial businesses, of which we're going to hear some stories about a few of them. But Terry also headed the team that cracked the largest fraud in US history. And he's one of the few people who have been able to give away over $1 billion to lottery winners. And that's a pretty distinctive bio. So I just want to say welcome, Terry. Thank you so much for being here today. I'm really looking forward to hearing your stories again and having my listeners hear the stories. So is there anything you would like to add to that bio before we get started?
Well, I've had 4 complete distinct careers, and from entrepreneurial all the way up to New York Stock Exchange companies that I've worked with. And it's fun to pass along ideas because people who are starting a new business or trying to develop their brand, having that education and things that might work, give you some few ideas that might be great, really will help and did help me over the years.
That's wonderful. I appreciate that. Yeah. And that's really the mission behind my show is to help small businesses who are starting to scale realize that branding is not just for the big guys. It actually is instrumental when you're starting to scale to keep focused, have some clarity, and attract the customers, clients, and capital you need to grow. So I'm excited to hear what you've got to share. So if you don't mind, let's get started and let's talk about a case story where basically you are launching a new brand. But besides launching the brand for the business, you also have to kind of build demand and really create a whole new category at the same time, which I can't think of anything more challenging. So tell us a little bit how you launched Soccer Slam.
Well, Soccer Slam came about as we were in the process of doing lots of cable television programming. When I started in cable television, it grew very quickly. So I got to see how the MTVs, we helped develop MTV and CNN and all of the HBO, all of the different cable companies. And when you're looking for a brand, you want a niche, you want something that a lot of people can put their arms around and do business with you. And so we started doing something called free previews. And the free preview started with HBO, where we would show HBO for free and then come on and say, hey, you like what you see? You see that movie? Well, if you'd like, now's the time to call. And we were selling millions of dollars a weekend. And it was a really fun and profitable business. But I realized when I was done, I was kind of doing work for hire. When you start a new cafe or a new, I guess, business of any kind, sometimes you do work for hire. Those that do work for hire, like lawyers, accountants, you do it, you charge them by the hour, you get the money. I would come home, I had lots of money, but I didn't really have an asset. I didn't have something that I could hold on to and think about selling down the road. So I thought, geez, I ought to do programming because all these channels that I worked with did programming. And all of a sudden you got a Double Dare or Nickelodeon, Double Dare and all the different things are there. There's something they could sell afterwards that had value afterwards. I didn't have that. So I thought, well, if I did a show, what show could I do? And I thought, well, in cable television, the number one show was, hard to believe, WWE, World Wrestling Federation in the day.
Yeah.
Professional wrestling. I thought, my gosh, what other sport could we do that would be like professional wrestling, where we could do a rock'em sock'em type show? And started thinking, well, how about soccer? Well, to brand it, just to make sure everybody knew what we were trying to do when we branded it, to do that, we spelled it SOCKER, Soccer Slam. And the whole theory behind it was to get professional soccer players who were paid nothing in those days, as back in 2001, and bring them together on an indoor soccer rink and make it full contact indoor soccer, and then add all the drama where this coach was messing around with that player's wife, or we had stunt actors that would fight in the middle of it, all of a sudden start, wrestling and hitting each other. And we threw in 2 balls and you got extra points if the red ball came in. And we put all of that together and created 4 shows called Soccer Slam. Well, Soccer Slam got placed right away on Fox Sports World, but because they were such a soccer purist network, they got more hate mail than ever. So the actual branding didn't work for soccer purists, but the colleges absolutely loved it. And ultimately, we got real busy continuing to do the HBO, and it was expensive to do that. You can think just professional soccer player liability costs that were there and all the things we had to do to reproduce those TV shows. We let it lay for a little while, and then The Athletic nationally put it out in a national newspaper article 20 years later. And lo and behold, we got a call from a producer, said, hey, we want to do a documentary on this. Is just crazy. We want to do a documentary, and ultimately they did. So it continues to live today. It's on the Hearst network, their streaming network called Very Local. And it talks all about Soccer Slam as a creative new approach of professional soccer.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. And what I like about that story too is when you talk about your target audience, you thought it was going to maybe be one particular group, and you ended up being a different particular target market. And that's okay. You just have to pivot and maybe even change the brand messaging a little bit as you go forward once you figure out, who your distinct audience is.
And also, as you think of audience, people's tastes, what you can say and can't say, what it was like back in the late 1990s, from diversity to the things you could say on air and all the innuendo stuff, no longer acceptable. So you have to be able to adapt to all of that when you're doing your brand to make sure you're reaching as large an audience as possible. I mean, everybody knows, kind of the demographic you're going after, but if you can expand that, especially today, with all of the social media and the international audiences you can get, you can sell so much more. Sure, it's nice to make a profit on a little bit, but what if you could quadruple or 10 or 100 times that if you could get it to take off?
Right. Is there something that surprised you when you launched Soccer Slam, whether it would be about how hard it was to get people to understand what you were trying to do, or even just people loved the concept, but maybe was there the ability to extend the brand even more than what you were talking about?
Well, once the brand's determined, what I didn't realize was all of the collateral, merchandising. We had people, even the guy who wrote the article for The Athletic said, I'd pay a lot of money for one of those New York Bruiser jerseys. See, we actually made up the names of the teams. We made up the names. We just looked through phone books, got crazy names of the players because people identified with that. And then we could rebrand those and sell merchandise with those. So I think the merchandise was kind of a surprise to me.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. All right, excellent. So if you were going to give, like one key takeaway from launching this particular entertainment, product venue, what would you give to someone else who's trying to get into that kind of like entertainment field with launching a brand?
Today, it's really tougher than it was then, because when we could go on something back then, or I appeared on the Johnny Carson show, 20 million people saw the night I was on Johnny Carson. And today, you really can't get that kind of audience because it's been split up between, it used to be the cable channels helped split that up, but now all the social media, you can now go to YouTube, you can go to YouTube TV, you can go to Netflix, all the different ways in it. So I think reaching out and trying to find ways to get people to tune in, and the social media aspect of it is such a bigger, but my favorite saying, it's better to have tried and failed than to succeed at doing nothing. So many people have $1 million idea, but they didn't take that first step. And I always say failure is the first step to success. And I learned that real early on in my career. I was on cable television. I was doing some online, and I was shaving one day, and I was on TV at 5 o'clock and didn't have the 5 o'clock shadow. So talk about branding. I wrote Schick and told them how much I love their Track 2 razor, knowing that in 2 weeks I'll be on national television promoting their Track 2 razor. 2 weeks to the day it came up. And you know what? During those 2 weeks, I thought a lot, like those of you that play Powerball, thought, what if I win? And I really told myself, this is something I may want to do. And I got the letter and said, "Dear Mr. Rich, we love that you expressed your complete satisfaction with your Track 2 razor. Unfortunately, we didn't make that razor. Gillette did." And I thought, "Oh my God, I wrote the wrong company." So I failed, but it invigorated me to decide that I want to do national television, and ultimately ended up on all three major networks and every cable network there is known to mankind over the years and all the promotions that we did. So I think that's one thing that is important. When you fail, learn by it, add to it, and make it work.
I like that. I like that. No, that's excellent. So, all right. Well, let's move on to your second story, because I really like some of the creativity that went into the growth of repositioning that brand. But basically, tell us a little bit under your leadership, how you were able to kind of revive or give some life support strategy to the Blank Park Zoo in Des Moines to get that going again.
It's toughest when you are using all of your money. I always tell everybody, if you're going to start a new company, get a job somewhere and learn the legal ends and all of the different things that you have, so that when you start your own, you understand that there's overhead and there's ongoing business costs and taxes and all those sort of things. Most people don't realize that when you work for another company, but you learn how that all works when you put it together, because it's a little more stress. If you start trying to do a company at 30 or 40, then you're risking, if you've got a family, a lot more of your own money. But if you start a company on the weekends and evenings when you've got guaranteed income, it's a lot easier to start a company. But then after I done and had my success at age 50, I was going to retire. I got a call and said, "Hey, they're going to close the zoo." It was run by the city and they didn't have the money. Most cities don't. And so we're taking it over as a nonprofit. Would you like to run it for us? Help us get it turned around with your business experience. Well, I grew up on a farm. I don't know why a zoo's any different. So when I jumped into that, it's a little bit different dynamic in that you realized who your audience was. Anyone 2 to 12 pretty much went to the zoo. I mean, we had every kid 2 to 12 went to the zoo. Didn't have a lot of money, but we needed to find ways to get more people to come through the door and pay more money. And I realized in the branding that they were charging, because it was a city, you got to help everybody, don't you? That they were only charging $4.95 to get in the door. So we gradually worked that price up to $9.95. And lo and behold, we made a whole bunch more money because people thought it was finally worth something, even though it was the same zoo. And we were able, you just don't want to double the price. You want to bring them in, you want to entertain them, you want to do all the right things. But the kids, really seemed to enjoy that as we did that. And so it started off with, we went after the young audience that we had. We thought we had that pretty well maximized, but we did something a little different because we increased the price and we started giving away free kids tickets because we knew they'd bring the parents and the parents would pay, right? And of course, they're going to buy the hot dogs and the hamburgers afterwards. All of a sudden, we started cash flow in this place. Wow. And it was fun. But then we thought, what other audience do we not have? And we realized young adults don't like to go to the zoo because of all the darn kids running around, right? Yeah. So what do young adults like? Booze. That's right. Beer, whiskey. So we started doing zoo brew at nights. We would have once a week, once a month, we'd have a zoo brew where we would serve alcohol. We had a band. We kept the animals out. And lo and behold, we had this whole new group of people coming in to see the zoo without any kids. And it was a great date night because you didn't have to be in a smoky bar in those days to be able to come in. And all of a sudden, things started turning around. The other thing we did is look for things that would enhance what we already had. And we were told that we needed $1 million to do the zoo new exhibit. That's how you get new people in. Usually it's babies at a zoo or a brand new exhibit.
Okay.
Well, we didn't have $1 million. So what we did was, what could we do to bring people in? What do we have that's free that people might enjoy? Well, one thing we have free, all these animals, is poop. So we started an exhibit called Scoop on Poop. So we had tiger poop, all these different poops, and kids come in and point and laugh. Then they go to school and tell their friends about it. And then we had the friends coming out, and our ticket increased almost, and it cost us absolutely zero because animals had to poop. So we had what we needed with it. Right. But the really crazy thing is, one of our employees said, "Hey, the other thing we would like you to do is tiger poop, because we have so many white-tailed deer, it overruns our state. What if we sold tiger poop, which is a natural predator, deer's natural prey? And so you put that around your flowers and the deer don't bother eating your flowers anymore." So we started selling tiger poop for $25 a bucket. And I think we made $30,000, $40,000 that year with all of that. So creatively, we had a different feel. It was a little edgy, We
Yeah.
still worked hard to make sure it was a family kids entertainment during the day, but at night, like Disney World does, we had Pleasure Island where we served booze and a different kind of feel. And now we're using that same asset and doubling the income that we had. So it really, really became fun. The final piece I'd tell you is you always want to have your team thinking about new ideas when you're talking about branding and what makes it different. When we did when we did the Zoo Brew, that was advertised in a whole different manner. Different social media to a different group, advertising to a different group than when we did the kids during the day, during the cartoon time, to say what was going on. But our employees said, we need, I know we don't have a lot of money, so we haven't done a lot of public service, but we'd love to do something for the community. And what we came up with was to do something called Dream Night. And so we went out and went to all the hospitals and doctors and said, we're looking for kids who probably won't be around in a year, and have them bring their families, friends, whoever they want, and everything's going to be free. So we brought all of these people in, families in, who have a child who probably will die in the next year, and they got free food, everything was open, pictures, the public television brought all their costume characters.
Right.
And the PR we got out of that was just phenomenal for very little money. In fact, we got sponsors immediately who wanted to be associated with it. And it was just a phenomenal deal. And people still remember that and bring their families back because we did that.
Yeah, I love the creativity of all the different programs. And I like the core concept of, the brand is the same, even though you have these distinct target markets that you're talking about. It's still, we're a great place to come and have fun.
Yes.
And there's animals.
That's the brand rather than the name, right?
Right,
the brand
exactly.
is the aura that you get when you come to Zoo Brew. You have a different feel, but you remember that it was at the zoo. It was the Des Moines Children's Zoo is the original name. We changed that immediately because it was the only zoo in the States. We said it was Iowa's wildest adventure and use that as a tagline. And I think that also helped to know that it wasn't just a little city zoo, it was a statewide zoo.
Yeah, no, I love that, because that's something I work on with my clients is your core brand is the same, but the way you message it or the way your marketing activities go out to your different target markets can be different because they need to be relevant. And in order to attract, like you said, the young adults versus the children versus the families. And the other thing that's still incredibly important today is this community involvement that you were talking about. I mean, that's a big push right now, is for organizations to not just for the publicity, but to really show their employees that they care about the community.
Yeah.
And it's a great part of the employer brand.
Employers is big, as you said, the entire community, and it's even bigger today. You'll find that the early generations, the Gen Xers and group, they look for people who are giving back community. It's much more important than it is for my generation. And I think I even look back in the cable. We took over Dallas, Texas, had an awful reputation for cable television, and our company bought that town. We went in and we were looking for something that would get us any kind of, they hadn't had a positive press article in the Dallas paper in the 3-4 years that they were in existence. We did something very simple. We announced it at Halloween is anybody who has a child who could not get out to trick or treat, call our office, call this number, and we will come out with candy, a costume character in a cable truck, and give the child candy and a costume character.
Wow.
Immediately we got that big an article in the Dallas newspaper stating that how great this company was.
Yeah.
So as you can tell, I love a lot of ideas. I mean, I bounce all over the place. People say, hey, can't we focus on something? But you've heard 3 or 4, hopefully, possible ideas that you might enjoy. I want to mention one thing I didn't learn until I was in my 50s. Yeah. That's something called COT. And here's the concept. I was working with our employees, and I would say, hey, how about, could we do red? Can we do green? Let's put polka dots over here, whatever. And they came in, and the management staff was just like shell shocked. And I said, what's going on? I said, we can't do all this. And I realized sometimes the king says, oh, poop, and everybody runs to try to do it. I didn't realize everybody wants to please the boss.
Yeah.
So I said, no, this is just an idea. And so we came up with the concept within the organization of how can I give you as a boss an idea that doesn't mean you have to do it, but I just want you to consider it. So we came up with something called COT. And what that means is consider or throw away. And so every time I put on an email, COT, that means consider or throw away. Now, Obviously, if I put action required, that means maybe 1 or 2% of my emails. That means you better do it. I really need this.
Yeah, get right to this. Yeah.
FYI, for your information, is more of you should know this in case we discuss it. But the COT, the idea there is to try to take this bushel basket of 100 ideas, and we'll put them all in the basket. We'll consider them, and then once we put them all together, we're going to sit down and we're going to prioritize it so that the legal folks can say, hey, watch out legally there, or the accountants go say we don't have the money. Sales say, hey, this is a good one. And we as a team then could come up with these ideas, and we all were on board of doing it. Now, what that allowed us to do is a couple of things. First, you got the ideas, everybody buys into it. But second is we made sure that when we did this, that we had as diverse a group as possible. If everybody around the table looked like me when we're coming up with the ideas, we're going to miss ideas that can be world changing, that you can make a lot more money than just the little focus on this particular area. So you want to try to have old, young, ethnic, age, gender, diversity, so you get all the ideas together, and then we together prioritize them. So it's a two-step process in coming up with ideas. First is creating the ideas and getting as many as possible, daring to dream. Mm-hmm. So what you try to do is do brainstorming sessions, just tell everybody, every idea is a good one. Let's get 100 ideas. Then you walk away from it and come back, and then you prioritize them and try to find the 3 or 4 that everybody likes best. And that's what you try to focus on. And always, I think in a business, as we talk about branding, mm-hmm. is to have 1 or 2 ideas always going at once, so that, you know, the core people are focused on this, but you always have some, it's called research and development, that always looking at a couple of the new ones, because things change. When taxis were invented, whoever thought you'd never see yellow taxis in New York? Right. Where today Uber has taken over. Exactly. You know, things change, and you got to realize that in any business. So you always want to be looking for that next new idea. No. So that's the idea we used at the zoo. That's the idea we used in my own companies. And that's the idea we took into the lottery, which was a state-owned business.
Before we jump into that, I mean, I love this methodology that you were using with your employees, because again, at the end of the day, your employees are your brand ambassadors, right? And to have a methodology or technique that you just shared where they're invested in how you're going to deliver the brand, well, then they're going to take ownership of it. And then their actions within the company, how they treat customers, how they treat each other, that's all going to reflect the fact that they've bought into the vision of the brand and what it could be. So,
and aren't afraid to say something. I mean, think about the receptionist who sees that the chair in the front is stained, it's old, it's about to fall apart. Somebody's going to get killed out there trying to sit in that thing. Yeah. So they put something in the suggestion box. So what happens? A week, 2 weeks later, maybe somebody takes it out, and then they start talking, and you don't want to make them mad, at the receptionist mad. So you pass it around, you know, so everybody kind of evaluates it. And the poor receptionist goes down to the break room and says, you know, I'm not giving any more ideas in this company because they don't listen to me anyway. I put in an idea. If that person then has the opportunity to write an email to me directly to the CEO or to whoever they want and put consider or throw away, they know that no response is needed nor wanted. We don't want you to respond back to any COT email or any COT face-to-face. We want to just get the ideas in the bucket so that everybody can consider it. And then if everybody as a group brings it to the top, you know, you probably have a winner and people who will be behind it.
Yeah, I like that. Real quick, before we jump on, what from your perspective as leader was more difficult, starting a brand from scratch versus rebuilding a brand that people have perceptions about already?
Both are so fun.
Okay.
I think that it's fun to improve upon a new one. A brand new idea takes a pretty good team and takes a lot of time to do it correctly and effectively. So I actually like both of them. And I think once you do one, it's a lot easier to do the other. The big thing is better to have tried and failed than to succeed at doing nothing. You've got to try to think and get started with something that it probably isn't as big a risk to begin with till you get something growing a little bit. And then you really start getting fun with the research and development, coming up with new ideas.
Right. Excellent. All right. Well, I'm excited about hearing your last story here, which is about the scandal within the U.S. lottery. But I love this story for a couple of reasons. One, it's fascinating just because, you know, we all love crime and how did somebody get away with that and things like that. But I love it from the branding standpoint because the brand is all about trust and building relationships with your customers, clients, consumers. And when something like fraud or a scandal or a reputational, event happens and people start to lose trust in you, can you, or how do you regain that? And I think you've got some great examples in this story.
Well, let's give the quick overview. A vendor of the lottery, our state lottery, ultimately figured out how to do a code and put it in for a drawing. But that drawing was for about 17 states, called Hot Lotto, a game played just like Powerball, where numbers were drawn. But he concluded and convinced the board to do the drawings by computer. Then he put a code in the computer, which allowed him one day a year to pick, instead of had to pick 12 million combinations to win, he could do it with 200 combinations. Gave those 200 combinations to his brother, who won once, gave his to his best friend, who won again. And then a couple of years later, that one day, he decided to do it in our state with a great big jackpot rather than small one that he was testing out. He got a big one, and he hit a $16.5 million jackpot. Well, the way that it worked, he bought it himself. And so we require, many states don't, but we required that you have to disclose who bought the ticket. Well, he bought the ticket. He didn't want to do that. So we got a bunch of lawyers together. We called foul and said, we're not paying you. And ultimately, with the evidence we had, got full confessions from him, his brother, and his best friend, and got them all in prison. Now, you don't get that very often. The moral of all of that, though, is the interesting thing to me is, as you can tell, I like marketing, I like promotion, I like branding. That's what it's all about. And we also had a very competent PR person who was on our team. And when it first started, our security guy and our person, we started with a culture that everybody, if you see something, say something. The first call that came in didn't sound right. That person called security, called PR, and that's when the investigation began. But as you look back and you figure things out, we learned a few things. And as we got this, number one, we were very bold in saying, we think something happened. We're going to go to the ends of the earth to figure this out because we want the game fair and honest. So we had a branding statement right away. And that was really critical, because the other lotteries, as we began doing this, kept saying, you're gambling with our money. This is an $80 billion gamble. Little state like yours should keep your mouth shut, because if you're accusing that the lottery is not good and you don't know and people don't want to play, we're going to lose money. We have $80 billion a year that we do in this business.
Yeah.
Now, $80 billion is more money than all the tickets to sports, all the tickets to music and movies combined.
Right.
That's a lot of money. So that's pretty scary to hold your guns to say, well, we want to do that. But every time we said that, we sold more tickets, because people figured if we're going to be that vigilant on making sure the game's fair and honest, and they will too. Now, I got to ultimately make those decisions, but I was supported by the governor, who said the same thing. I want the game fair and honest. And quite honestly, I think there are states, with all the financial difficulties some states have, that would have said, just pay it and shut up, because we can't mess around, because this money goes to good causes and helps us with our taxes and whatever.
Right. And this
is first and foremost,
we learned. I was going to say, this is the state of Iowa, right? I don't think we said
state of Iowa
which state it was. Yeah.
So first and foremost, be honest. You want people to think of the brand as fair and honest. If you're going to do business with something, you want to make sure that you feel good about that brand, right? The other thing that was interesting is, people kind of looked at it and we went after it, is we started immediately by doing a list. This took almost 6 or 7 years before we got these guys in prison. And what we did was started so that on this date, this is what happened. And when something new happened, we just went down one level and did that. So every time we did a press release or talked to any media, it was the same all the way down to the new event. Reason that's important is because today you'll find, if you see a story that's going on, people will try to retell the story and they'll tell it a little differently. And all of a sudden people get real confused, but we just handed the same document with the addition every time. Okay. And you know what? The press reported it correctly. Excellent. That's perfect.
Excellent.
Finally, the thing I learned was, if you can stand by the police when they're talking about it and they're out investigating, if you can stand by them, you immediately are discredited that you have anything to do with it, right?
Oh, yeah.
We're standing there saying, we're going to find this, we're going to fight it. And so people, when they saw that, knew that the lottery I wasn't involved in it. You know, people may have thought I was or wasn't, but by saying that and standing by the police, our brand kept a very high level of professionalism and, trust in
Yeah.
that brand.
Okay. And were there any impacts to lottery ticket sales or anything like that?
Here's the crazy thing. I mentioned every time we got on and people heard about hot lot or whatever, we sold more tickets. Ultimately, lottery industry and gambling at 80 billion, it could have gone down if we'd have really found that this was widespread and all sorts of things, even though it became national when it was all said and done.
Mm-hmm.
We went from 80 billion in money when I tell the story to $110 billion being sold today.
Wow.
So it actually did not affect negatively that. People still remember the fraud, but they remember it as we caught them.
Yeah.
Now, few people get that because usually if it's a murder, rape, assault, whatever, you have somebody and then they keep appealing it and they never admit guilt.
Right.
We really worked hard to get actual confessions and do prosecution so that they admitted it and everybody knew that we came to a close. That's called closure. Most people don't get that.
Yeah, no, I like that. Like I said, I like that you had the courage to say, hey, we're going to tell what happened here because we honor and respect our customers, the taxpayers, the people who are buying these lottery tickets. And, if the other states were a little upset about it, you've got to stick to what your core values are.
Yep.
And making sure. And I think your authenticity paid off, as you obviously explained in the stories.
It did. I think, though, that if you think of the organization that ran it, that hired this guy,
Yeah.
they really wanted to be quiet about it because what if we were wrong? They didn't want to get sued. And, we were balancing all these things. And I don't care if we lose everything, I want the game fair and honest. And I think that shone through, but I think they also had a legitimate beef because there were 2 lawsuits, class action lawsuits came afterwards that I think ultimately cost probably $3 to $5 million. Yet the total income went from 80 to $120 billion. That's a $40 billion increase in sales.
Right.
That $1 to $5 million was nothing compared to what we had. And if we'd have waited, they'd have continued to do it. They'd still be doing it today. And at some point it'd be much bigger. And then you really do have to worry about it being closed down.
Right. And then how do you explain if someone were to dig a little deeper and say, yes, this has been going on for years? How do you explain that you missed it? How do you explain that you allowed it to happen? So, yeah.
Yeah. And I don't think there's anybody from the other lotteries that didn't have intentions right in their mind. They were trying to protect the monies and the integrity of the lotteries within their own jurisdiction. And you can imagine a bank that has somebody embezzling in Timbuktu out there, and you're the big bank in the big city.
Right.
You got to be careful that case, people might think that you're there and now they're going to go to credit unions or whatever. So it is not an easy decisions to make. So I lost some friends, I made some friends.
Yeah.
And you just try to do what you feel is best in your heart.
Yeah. What's best in your heart and what's right, because ultimately you're the one who has to defend it at the end of the day, right?
And sleep at night. Yeah.
And sleep at night. So, yeah, no, I like that. And I like that, like you said, honest communication and respect for your audience is really what makes the difference when it comes to branding. So people want to be treated humanely, like they would treat each other. And when an organization can do that, I do think they get rewarded. So
sometimes when, Tylenol, remember the big branding problem that they had, yet they came out on the other end, but think what it would have been if they had handled it a little
differently. Yeah.
Differently.
Yeah. Try to kind of shove it under the rug, so to speak. So, all right. Well, Terry, this has been absolutely fascinating. Like I said, I was excited to have you on, that you had so many stories about creating a brand and creating a category, repositioning a brand to accelerate growth. And then, like you said, trying to rebuild trust after a scandal, and how using your core value of being honest and doing what's right really made a difference for the brand. So,
and anybody that's out there looking to start a new brand, start anew, and how you do it, it's absolutely so rewarding. You can't believe how rewarding it is when it works. Success is really fun. So keep trying.
I like that. I like that a lot. Well, that's wonderful. And we can end there. So if people want to book you to speak at their event, because you're a fantastic speaker, obviously, with so many stories, or just learn more about what you know, how can they get a hold of you?
I think the easiest way is terryspeaks.com, TERRY speaks with an S.com. It has all the contacts, all the samples, the 2 books, everything in that. But most of all, I hope taking away from this that they get excited about doing something and being that entrepreneur and being that success for branding.
Right. I agree. Thank you so much for being here and sharing your stories. And to all of our listeners, ditto what Terry said. I hope you were inspired to ignite your growth by leveraging your brand. Thank you.